Hey guys, John here from Bring the SEO. Today we're going to be talking about SEO pricing, and in particular, should you show your prices? That being, of course, displaying your prices on your agency's website. Now, this makes for an interesting conversation and one that I've been involved in a number of times, and usually that conversation gets quite heated because you'll have people that say absolutely not. And then, of course, you'll have people saying you certainly should. Now, admittedly, I've tried both. And for me, I found that showing my prices was the right thing to do. And I made that decision simply because I was receiving far too many inquiries from less than ideal prospects. At that point, I think I was charging $2,500 a month, and it becomes quite tiring over time when you're picking up the phone and you're dealing with, prospects who want to pay $300 a month. So I went from not showing my prices to showing my prices, and for me at least, that was the right thing to do. Now, again, as I said, this conversation around showing your prices or not certainly makes for an interesting one. And I've seen people that, it's really interesting to me, the people that say no, are fully committed to saying no, and the same applies for those who say yes. And very rarely do I see anyone changing their mind around that. Now, in this short presentation, I'm going to present you with a couple of ways in which you can sort of get around this, because I'm not sure if that should be a win-lose situation. I think ideally it should be a win-win for both the prospect and for the SEO consultant. Having said all of that, let's jump in and start by looking at some of the pros of showing your prices. In other words, some of the benefits of showing your prices. Firstly, of course, it helps filter out time wasters and having to deal with less than ideal prospects. And that was true. That was certainly true for me, because the minute I started showing my prices, I stopped getting as many customer inquiries, but the ones that I did get already knew what my prices were. So I no longer, by displaying my prices, I no longer had to deal with people wasting my time expecting, high quality SEO for $99 a month. Secondly, it can accelerate the sales process due to less resistance around cost. Obviously, if someone picks up the phone and calls or sends an inquiry through and they know what your rates are, then it's going to be much less than likely that you're going to have any sort of resistance around cost as you move the prospect through the sales process, because you already know what your rates are. All right, so let's take a look now at some of the cons of showing your prices. Firstly, your competitors can see what you charge and potentially undercut you. Now, that may not always be the case, but it's certainly something to be mindful of. Showing your prices, of course, full transparency around pricing. That means that not only can your customers see what you charge, but it also means that your competitors can too. Secondly, it prevents any sort of engagement and relationship building, because if someone, a prospect lands on the site, they make their decision based upon price alone, and you're unable to hold a conversation and demonstrate any sort of value. And that's my next point. It removes the ability to demonstrate value. So when there's, a prospect sees a price, they make the decision based upon price alone, without any real understanding of exactly what it is that you do or how you could potentially help them. Okay, so what should you do? Let's take a look at a couple of different strategies here that I'll share with you. Let's start by providing a baseline. Providing a baseline gives prospects an idea of your prices. So for example's sake, instead of having fixed pricing on site, you can say something along the lines of prices starting from. Now this, of course, feeds into my next point here, which is it provides flexibility in terms of being able to charge at any rate without locking you in. And by that, I'm talking about, obviously, if you charge, let's say, $2,500, but you pick up a client where, there's a tremendous amount of work to be done because you performed a gap analysis and you can see that they're in a really competitive space and they might need to double down and that price might go from 2,500 to, let's say, 5,500. If you're displaying your price at the front end at 2,500 and then you quote 5,500, that's going to lead to a bit of confusion, and that can be detrimental towards sales, because you don't want to get yourself into a situation where a client says, wait a minute, you said you charge $2,500 a month. Why are you now telling us it's 5,500? So prices starting from allow you to present your pricing on the lower end, but still give you that flexibility of being able to go higher if necessary. The next point here is it may be considered less intimidating, especially for clients with modest budgets. So obviously you don't want to display your highest pricing, because that of course can, it could lead to the potential of missing out on having that conversation, that level of engagement with someone who has perhaps a more modest budget. But if you can position yourself there at that lower price point, prices starting from, then you can start that conversation, and you can help guide them in terms of, perhaps they may not be starting at that lower price point, but these are the reasons why we might be charging you a higher price point. And lastly, it helps weed out those seeking cheap SEO services, right, whilst drawing ideal clients in. The next option is using smart forms. Now, smart forms are pretty simplistic, and this is certainly nothing new, but this is where you convert your inquiry forms into smart forms that gather budget information up front. In other words, as you can see on screen here, what's your monthly marketing budget? And this will allow the prospect, or lead rather, to sort of pre-qualify themselves, and it will give your sales team some idea of what to expect when that inquiry comes through. So this, of course, touches on the points that I've got here. It helps clients pre-qualify themselves. Obviously, if they're thinking, $500 a month and they're working in a fairly competitive space, well, then that may not be such an ideal situation. Now, this ties into my final point here, which is it can also help direct the follow-up and sales process, right? So let me give you an example of that. Let's say someone submits an inquiry and they're working in the small loan space, which is highly competitive, and they put down their their monthly marketing budget at, say, $500. Well, obviously, when that inquiry comes through, the SEO consultant, the agency owner, is going to know right away, okay, well, this isn't a realistic budget for the space that this prospect is working in. So from there, they can then gather up some information that they can present to the prospect when they start that conversation, in order to help guide them towards a budget that might be more realistic. Okay, lastly, using a lead magnet. Now, this isn't something that I see much of. However, I've seen it done in the past, and I've certainly seen a number of agencies do this in the past, and it can work quite well. This is where you convert your pricing page into a landing page and offer your pricing guide as a downloadable PDF. In other words, as you can see on screen, enter your name and email to download our price list. Now, of course, when they do that, they're added to an autoresponder sequence, and this allows repeated follow-ups as part of an ongoing nurturing, which can help warm leads and drive more sales. Because if they've made it to your site, they've downloaded your price list, they've gone through all of these steps to see how much you charge, but they don't submit an inquiry for whatever reason, let's say, you then at least have the ability to follow up, right? And this is where you would follow up with, value videos and value assets and case studies and all of that other good stuff, demonstrating your processes and why you do things a certain way and what separates you from other agencies. These are all tremendously powerful ways to build that trust, build that know, like, and trust that I talk a lot about. And this, of course, helps, as I said here, helps warm the leads and drive more sales. Okay, so this all comes back to, what should you do? Should you display your prices? Yes or no? Well, I think at the end of the day, the answer comes down to deciding upon what's right for you. And this is the advice that I typically give to most SEO consultants. You need to think about your own situation. Do we want to display our prices? Do we want to encourage that level of engagement? Do we want prospects to book a call? Are we happy for them? Are we happy to just show our prices? These are all questions that you need to ask, and perhaps it might be a matter of testing some of the things that I've just suggested, and making a decision from there. But I'm not quite convinced yet. I mean, I've been involved in this conversation for many years, and I'm not quite convinced either for or against showing your prices. I think it's a personal decision, and as I say here on screen, you need to do what's right for you. Hey, if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more, head over to bringtheseo.com. We provide business development training for SEO consultants wanting to improve their processes, increase profits, and scale to $100,000 a month or more without all the stress and overwhelm.